What's going on, everybody? My name is Bigger, and welcome back to the second episode of the Bald, Black, and Brilliant podcast. Let me get around this. Hopefully that worked. I'm still learning all of this new equipment. Anyway, the reason that I'm doing this episode is really because I wanted to do a part 2 of the first one and give a better explanation or a more in-depth explanation as to why I feel that it is important to do the work that I'm doing and why I have been consistent since literally October 8th, 2023. First things first, full disclosure, and I've discussed this on Instagram, so if you are from there, you can fast forward or just skip this episode. But if you are new here and you're just finding me, I want to be honest with you and fully transparent, and I think that that's important because there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty that's floating around in social media spaces and places like YouTube, all of the stuff. So I want to be as transparent and as honest as I can be. So first things first, yes, I am married to an Israeli woman. She is first generation from her father's side, born in America, right? Half of her family is in Israel, right? My sons, obviously, we have 2 sons together. My wife and I have been together for 20 years, over 20 years, rather, pardon me. And so we have kids together. They are Jewish, right? And so without a doubt, that is at least partial or a part of my motivation for being so outspoken and in my advocacy for Israel and for the Jewish people and standing up against anti-Semitism, right? However, if I'm being honest, it would have been way easier for me to just comfort my wife, make sure that my sons are educated, and not put my face out there to be attacked and threatened and doxxed and all of the things, right? But the reality is, none of that scares me. Number one, I'm from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and I grew up in a crack era. So what that means, right, is that my skin is thick, and I don't take an internet threat seriously at all. If you're not in my face, I do not care. You cannot harm me. You can't hurt my feelings because I don't know you. So I don't put any stock into anything that you're saying. That being said, right after the October 7th massacre, like literally right after, the next day, I started to see the formation of what we are witnessing now, right? I saw on the 8th of October protests being set up with people saying globalize the Intifada and supporting the resistance. I saw groups like Black Lives Matter advocating for the Hamas holes. I like they put the paratrooper dude on their page. Like they did that, right? In addition to that, shortly after, I remember there was a plane somewhere in Russia that was attacked by people. Like they were literally jumping on the wings of the plane. Like it was still on a runway because they heard that either, I can't remember if the plane was going to Israel or if they heard that there were Israeli people on the plane. But either way, these people in Russia, very far from the Middle East, right, were taking part in this violence. And I remember now I'm going to be honest, I remember downplaying the idea that the world would go in this direction prior to October 7th, right? I've had plenty of conversations with plenty of Israeli people and Jewish people who I totally respect, and I would not argue them down, but I would happily debate that the world back then is not the world that we're living in now, and people would rise up, right? Because and my reference for all of that were things like the punch a Nazi movement, how everybody in America was up in arms when those people down south was chanting Jews will not replace us and all of that, right? So in my mind, there's no way that the world we're living in now could actually happen, right? Fast forward to October 8th, and I saw it happening. So one of the very first things that I did was apologize to as many of those people who I had debated as I possibly could, right? Because I was 100% wrong. And that leads me into why I decided to kind of chronicle and mirror, or hold up the mirror rather, to all of the atrocities that have been going on, right? Because I didn't see anybody doing it, right? I believe that I said this before, but right before this October 7th massacre occurred, I was in the midst of kind of creating a bunch of inroads with a bunch of Black creators on TikTok, and I was trying to do the same thing on Instagram, but I was kind of popping on TikTok. Now, when I say I was kind of popping, I mean that I had amassed like 5,000-6,000 followers, right? And I started making these connections with these people, these creators that had like hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of followers, and they were inviting me to their lives. They were actually coordinating with me because of my work schedule so that I could actually take part in these lives. And once October 7th happened, I tried to reach out to some of these people like, yo, when are we gonna, start talking about this? And I found myself being blocked. And because I'm not internet savvy or tech savvy or whatever, it took me a minute to actually realize that I had been blocked. Like the first person that I asked, and I should have known from this, the very first person that I asked actually asked me, or to refresh their memory, if I was married to a Jewish woman. So I was like, yeah, my wife is Jewish, she's Israeli. And after that, I didn't hear anything. In my silly mind, right, that person was really just trying to get a bunch of people together for the live. And I figured that I had possibly solidified my spot on that live because I had a direct connection. What I didn't know was that, and this is an assumption, but what I didn't know is that this person was now going to all of the people that we had, all of the mutuals that we had, and basically blackballing me, right? And it wasn't until a couple days after everything happened that I put two and two together and was like, oh, okay, this is where we at. All right, that's interesting. And at that point, I decided that I was going to have to, I understood rather, that I was going to have to kind of pick up the mantle, right? And then I had to really be honest with myself as to what it was that I wanted to expose, or what I wanted to hold the mirror up to, right? And the reason that I say that is because, like I said, I have had many conversations. I have a lot of friends who are Israeli, who actually live in Israel, right? People that I was communicating with on a regular basis well before October 7th. And what I understood was that they knew that this was a possibility. And it became important to me to let them know that they had somebody that was willing to speak up. And on top of that, I had to mentally reference all of the things that I had been told, right? Meaning that so many people had told me that if things go left, the people in the West, especially in America, are going to be protesting in droves. And I was like, no, that's not gonna happen. And then what do we see? We see that happening, right? So like I said, at that point, I was forced to kind of dig in and say, or pick the lane that I was going to go into. I'm hoping that this is all making sense. I should have wrote it down. I should have had notes. I shouldn't be freestyling this, but here we are. Anyway, it was important for me to acknowledge the reality that another reality that all of my Israeli friends had been telling me. And that was that a lot of them and a lot of people in Israel were not happy with the Israeli government. And the reason that that's important is because it's the same thing in America, right? At the time, Biden was the president. There still is a large group of people who had issues with the Biden administration. Just as today, there are plenty of people who have issues with the Trump administration. What a lot of people do not know in America is that prior to October 7th, there was a big divide in Israel because people were not feeling Benjamin Netanyahu, right? Now, the reason that that's important is because the people in the West that are up in arms are conflating the Israeli government with the Israeli people. And those same people here in America don't want they don't want to be victims of that, right? The people who were anti-Trump did not want to be held accountable for Trump's actions because they felt that they were individuals. And the people who were anti-Biden didn't want to be associated with the Biden administration or be held responsible or accountable for any decisions that that administration made. What bothered me is that nobody wanted to take those same things into consideration about the Israeli people. Mind you, the day before and weeks before October 7th, there were tons of protests by Israeli people trying to get Netanyahu out of office. That is very important. In recognizing that and seeing the onset of the violence that we now see has just spread everywhere, I felt that it was important for me to, like I said, to hold up the mirror and expose people to themselves, right? Now, here's the thing. I understood even then that people were not going to be reflecting on their actions immediately, which is why I felt that it was necessary for me to do videos and have ways that it can stand the test of time or be referenced for far down the road, right? That was important to me. The reason that was important to me is because, if I'm being honest, I honestly did not think that this was going to be almost a 2-year situation. I thought that it would be a couple months, and I figured that a year or so after that, people would then be open to reflecting and talking about the mistakes that they made and how misinformation made them do it, pretty much, right? Now, as it just kept going on and kept going on and kept going on, the amount of violence just got worse, right? Then we started to see the encampments. Then we started to see people being chased into buildings and having to barricade themselves in for their own safety because these mobs of, in some cases, college kids would have literally ended their lives. This is actual fact. This is not conjecture. This is stuff that actually happened and is still happening in some places. Not the encampments and all of that, but the violence is still there in full swing. And the denial of facts is another thing that really it bothers me because I try to look at everything as objective as possible. And I'm sure that it's just me, but I feel that everybody should be able to do that. And I also am willing to help people look at things objectively. So I figure, why not do that, right? Another part of my motivation for doing what I do is the trolls, right? I know how trolls operate. And especially at the onset of the situation, one of my goals was to take as much troll attention and troll heat as I could. Why? Not because I wanted to get popular for that, because I don't see how you could get popular for that. It's not because I'm a sadist and I'm just into that kind of weird keyboard combat. It's because I understood that there were so many Jews who were trying to wrap their heads around this atrocity, and they were still being attacked online. So the way I looked at it, if somebody is trolling me, they don't have the time to troll somebody who is grieving, right? And obviously I'm only one person, but if I'm being honest, I was literally getting thousands upon thousands upon thousands of trolls. So I really felt like I was making a difference in that regard. Another motivation for me was the fact that I started to see a bunch of black folk putting themselves in line with Palestinians and aligning the struggles, right? And that's just not true. For example, in America, the black struggle that we encountered did not come from a government that we voted in or our parents voted in. You understand? That's not the case. In no point in the history of black folks in America have we sided with the oppressor and turned a blind eye to our own oppression. In America, the black community rose up. We demanded our equal rights. We fought through Jim Crow and all of the segregation and the redlining and all of those things, right? We lived through that and we fought that. These people have not done that. Now, there are definitely people in Palestine who have voiced their opinion or voiced an opposition to Hamas, right? But it has definitely not been the collective. And even with the way that the war has taken shape, and what I'm talking about is like the Hamas holes hiding in the tunnels, right? Even with that, these people have not decided collectively to rise up against this oppressor. Whereas in America, we absolutely did. So I had a problem with seeing, going back to the black creators that I was rocking with on TikTok, I had a real issue with the fact that this is the stance that they're taking, because it really is coming from a place of ignorance. And then I started to understand the manipulation that fed that. And once I started to see that, well, then it was no turning back. It was really, I had to absolutely 100% go in because of things like the Arab Islamic slave trade and how black people have been subjugated by Islam for centuries. The longest running slave trade in the history of history is the Arab Islamic slave trade. This is still going on to this day in places like the Sudan and Congo. Like, this is actual fact. This is not conjecture. This is not me making stuff up. And on top of that, this is not stuff that I just learned, right? So part of my mission became to educate the people who look like me, who have been lied to and manipulated by Islam. And I understand, I understand that that situation is a very, very sensitive and nuanced situation because of people like Minister Farrakhan. And I've spoken about this before on Instagram. You have people like Minister Farrakhan who, when nobody was speaking up for black folk, he was doing it. So an allegiance kind of formed unknowingly to the black community to the Nation of Islam and Farrakhan, and then it became easier for them to manipulate our minds, right? And omit facts, right? And in all of that, you have so many people in the black community finding themselves on the side of the resistance, when the reality is I wouldn't have a problem if they were advocating for the Palestinian people and their struggle. But what they're doing is ignoring the actions of Hamas. There's a cause and an effect for everything that happens. And the reality is that October 6th, there was a ceasefire in place. October 7th, Hamas broke that ceasefire. The fact that they're getting their asses kicked, the fact that they decided to sacrifice their own civilians doesn't have anything to do with Israel, the government, or the IDF. This is all on Hamas. And the fact that nobody was willing to put that out there, and even today people are not willing to acknowledge that and understand that dualities exist, right? The truth is that I am 100% in support of Jewish people and Israeli people and their right to exist, their right to have their country, and their right to not be harmed anywhere else. I'm not gonna make any excuses for that at all. At the same time, I don't want to see dead babies, period. I don't care where they're from, what region they're from. I don't care what religion they are. I don't want to see that. You understand what I'm saying? But I understand the reason that I'm seeing these things. And I feel that it is important that people like myself who are not afraid of the keyboard warriors out there to voice this and be loud about it and be aggressive about it. And that's why I am the way that I am, and I don't make any apologies for anything that I do or say. And on top of that, I'm always willing and have offered hundreds of debates. Right now, just real briefly about that, I offer the debates a lot, and in my mind, these people have a point that they want to prove, or they have facts that they believe are true. My goal in asking them to go live is to, in real time, debunk what their thoughts are and hit them with actual facts. And this is not to say that I believe that I have the ability to make people change their mind or change their viewpoint. My goal is to make sure that people have the actual information so that they can make an informed decision. I don't expect people to just blindly support one side or the other. The problem that we've run into is that people are blindly supporting the side that is lying to them. And what makes it worse is they know that they're lying to them. They know that they're using these people, and they know that these people are putting themselves on the line, and they don't care because they're willing to sacrifice anyone and everyone to obtain their goal, right? So with that came the reality to me that these are the things that I needed to discuss. These are the things that I needed to bring to the forefront. And these are the fights that I needed to be prepared to fight. And since I've started, that is what I have done and what I will continue to do. I'm not going to stop. I'm only going to go harder and bigger any opportunity that I get. Why? Not because I want the attention. I would love to have attention for doing something other than this, right? Like just so that people know, right? Before, the reason that I was trying to connect with all of those Black creators is because I have this idea for a thing called Hoodvocate, which basically is an advocate for people in the hood, right? And what that means is not just Black people or the Black struggle, but to fight against discrimination for people in the LGBTQIA community and the marginalized Black community and anti-Semitism and just to fight for all marginalized groups. That was the goal that I was working towards, right? In the beginning part of my journey, which was on TikTok. At this point, I still absolutely 100% want to get Hoodvocate off of the ground, but until this situation is taken care of, or until there are more people who are picking up the gauntlet and going in and making these types of videos and communicating with the people, I have to juggle a whole bunch of things at once. And unfortunately, that means that Hoodvocate has to be kind of put on the back burner for a little bit, because the situation at hand needs to be handled, because people from all communities are now ganging up on the Israeli and Jewish community, and they need people in their corner. So that is where I'm at with it. That is why I do what I do, and I'm not going to stop. Period. Point blank. So hopefully all of this made sense. My next episode will not be about this. I think I'm going to start talking about the Arab Islamic slave trade. I have reached out to a couple people to try to have some guests on. We'll be doing that via Zoom, so we'll see how that works out. But in the meantime, in between time, do all of the things, right? Subscribe, comment, like it, share it, please, right? I'm trying to get as many eyes on this podcast as possible, and I promise it will be more structured in the upcoming episodes. And I'm going to be talking about a whole lot of things. And I think that is necessary conversations, right? I'm not just blowing smoke up anybody's ass. I'm not going to be one-sided. I'm going to be as objective as I possibly can, and I invite anyone who feels I need to be checked to do so. I have no problem sharing the stage, right? But please, like I said, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. Check me out on Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast. Also on Instagram, you can subscribe to me, and I am also on Patreon. So there's a ton of ways that you can support what I'm doing and help me to continue this work if you believe in what it is that I'm doing, right? So with all of that said, protect your peace and have the day that you deserve.